Welcome back, guys. If you are just joining us, this is INX Prime Live. Remember, we are on your screens every single Monday to Friday between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Now, we are excited to introduce Ahmed Ghoor as well as Tahiya Moosa Wadiwala now, who is actually part of the MSA Union. Now, MSA has actually launched Project BlackSeed, which is an initiative to address the humanitarian crisis out in Sudan. Now, the campaign actually aims to raise about 1 million, Australian dollars for Sudan's relief through LaunchGood, in partnership with Islamic Relief Australia as well as Human Appeal. Now, we do have them in studio right now. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Thanks for joining us here on INX Prime Live.
Thank for having us.
No, it's a pleasure having you. I mean, I'm reading up a little bit more on Project BlackSeed, but I know that to our audience that maybe perhaps doesn't know much about it, we know it is quite a noble initiative, but maybe perhaps tell us a little bit more as to the rationale behind this campaign. You can actually start.
Sure, yeah. So Project BlackSeed, yeah, like you mentioned, started with the MSAs in Australia, and they've partnered with MSAs throughout the world, through Europe, the US, Southeast Asia, and the idea behind it is to focus on large-scale neglected global catastrophic problems in the world. So these are issues that are really serious but are not getting as much attention. Yeah. And this year they picked Sudan. And the idea behind that is because Sudan is a huge global catastrophic problem. We have over 10 million people displaced, over 25 million people facing acute food insecurity. It's estimated about 8 million people are on the brink of starvation, and that's not counting all the diseases and the death from the war. And as compared to other catastrophic problems in the world currently, it's getting not that much attention.
No, without a doubt. I mean, a lot of focus is on many other, issues that are happening in the world. But more specifically, I mean, obviously everyone's looking at Gaza as well and Palestine. Ahmed, I mean, you mentioned some of the needs as well and some of the, the situation currently out in Sudan. But I just want to touch on that. We're looking at, the needs in particular. What are some of the actual needs? Maybe you can elaborate on some of the needs as well. And how do you guys plan as a Project Seed, BlackSeed in that sense, to be able to rectify that?
It's a war zone. It's a dire humanitarian crisis, and people need everything there. I mean, you can start small and say there's people who are collecting non-perishables and clothing. I mean, if you're going to bomb a certain place, those people have lost everything. They've lost their entire life savings. But at the same time, the secondary needs develop where they need psychological help and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, if you mention Sudan, especially in South Africa, and I think within our communities, there isn't that much of attention to it. And not to compare wars or something like that, but if you mention Palestine, there's kids as young as 4 and 5 who'll be able to tell you there's a war in Gaza and this is going on. Yeah. So our first aim is to raise awareness and get people talking that Sudan is also in the exact same crisis. They are also going through dire need of basic necessities. And from there, we hope to raise enough funds, and which is why we've partnered with Islamic Relief. They are one of the only organizations that are actually getting aid in. So we're partnering with them. We're trying to raise as much as possible. As we said, the campaign says $1 million Australian dollars. We hope to raise far more than that, inshallah. And hopefully from there, whatever little bit that we can do, we hope to do.
Yeah, it's great to see organizations come together and work together in that sense. And I think, obviously the MSA Union has a lot of standing in terms of students, but also a young or a youth population that really enjoys what you guys are doing. I just want to come to some of the comments and questions coming in from social media as well. I mean, we have a comment from Imran, and he says that, he loves this concept of Project BlackSeed, and he wants to contribute. But the problem that he has is that sometimes he's not sure when it comes to these different initiatives, that the money is actually going to the right places. I wanted to ask you guys as well, and I think Ahmed, you can come in here as well. How do we know for sure that that this money is going to the places or to the people that need it the most or the most urgent in that sense?
Yeah, it's an important question, and that's why we also partner with Islamic Relief South Africa. Islamic Relief have a very good reputation, but in fact their first initiative was in Sudan. Islamic Relief was founded when the founder, Mr. al-Banna, went to Sudan and realized that, he wants to do something, and he founded Islamic Relief. So Islamic Relief have been operating in Sudan since their inception, and they've been operating on the ground. Us, as the MSA, we don't handle funds at all. the money, the donation link goes directly into Islamic Relief South Africa's account, who then transferred to Islamic Relief Sudan. And they have a long history of being in Sudan, moving from safe zone to safe zone and supporting the people of Sudan.
That's brilliant. And I mean, I'm just looking at some of the other comments and questions coming in. You know, Safia says she's very, very interested as well, and she wants to actually get involved and contribute. I guess my question then comes to you, Tahiya, you know, in terms of a contribution, how do people get involved? How can they actually contribute? How can they volunteer? How can they come on board in any way to help this project in that sense?
Okay, so at the moment, all our links are on our social media at MSA Union, Twitter, Instagram, X, TikTok. We've posted a variety of different types of content on there. You are welcome to DM us for more information. What we're currently trying to do is host a series of dialogues. So at the moment we've got 4 dialogues planned, one for Johannesburg, Pretoria, Durban and Cape Town within the next 3 weeks. All dates and that will be posted on our Instagram. And we're hoping to have a variety of panelists, both young, elderly, political analysts, people from Sudan, who are currently based in South Africa, and engage in dialogue. But at the same time, while having these discussions, we hope to have fundraisers with it. So at the moment, we're talking to a lot of our smaller communities like Roshni, Polokwane. We don't generally get as much traction, if you have to say, in Joburg or Pretoria.
Yeah.
And these aunties, so-called aunties, have come on board and are willing to assist us with little cake sales and fundraisers and that kind of thing. Project BlackSeed runs during November, and internationally this is like the first semester for international universities. However, in South Africa this is peak exam season, the jacarandas are out.
Yeah.
So working with our chapter MSAs became a bit of a challenge, which is why we approached the broader communities. You must remember that the main initiative of MSA Union is to work with our chapters. So when I say chapters, I mean MSA Wits, MSA Tax, MSA UCT, MSA UKZN. Unfortunately, with exam season, we've sort of changed direction a bit, and the other communities, so like your Caring Women's Forum and that kind of women's forums across these smaller towns are willing to come on board and have their own fundraisers. So all sorts of those activities and campaigns will be posted across our platforms, our WhatsApp groups, that kind of thing. And I'm sure we'll even share some of it with INX. At the same time, we've started a merchandise campaign, and we've selling packages of little black seed, which we know that black seed or kulunji has so many prophetic benefits as well.
Yeah.
And with that, someone has so graciously donated stickers to us, and I think stickers are quite trendy and cool. So we have those packs for sale, which also pictures and that will be found on our social media. And hopefully whatever funds we can raise go straight to Sudan, inshallah.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, just touching on, the fact that, maybe a lot of the student chapters are currently busy as we speak, it also gives you guys the platform to now build better relationships with other NPOs, organizations, civil society. So I guess it's also a blessing in that sense. But I just want to touch on another comment. It's, here at INX, I think we find with, having controversial comments or questions coming in. And we have, a guy called Ferreira. He's actually Sudanese himself. And he was speaking about the fact that, there's a lot of exposure out there for other issues that are happening in the world, and we can obviously come down to Palestine and Gaza and say that social media was the reason why there was so much of awareness around it, but he says when it comes to Sudan it's very little. Why do you guys feel like that's the case, or if you agree with him in that sense?
No, definitely. I think that even if you compare to Western Sahara, and there's a lot of the African struggle is real, and also we know that a lot of revolution comes from student revolution, so I think that part does play some sort of role in this. But when it comes to raising awareness, I feel like everyone's like, okay, because it's Palestine and this course has been going on for so long, we somewhat forget that it's more a case of like, you can't just pick one struggle. If you're going to pick the struggle, you should fight for equality everywhere. So I know that's not the case. Palestine is widely talked over, not to say that we should stop talking about Palestine. Heck no, that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
But we definitely need to raise more awareness for Sudan and other situations. And one of the topics in our dialogues is the intersectionality between the Palestinian struggle and the Sudanese struggle. So hopefully you guys can look forward to those dialogues and those discussions.
Let's perhaps talk a little bit more, Ahmed, about those dialogues, right? Like, I know what some of the topics that you just mentioned are going to be that, but how far are you guys going to go in terms of this dialogue? Is it going to be something that, sometimes it's nice for people to feel uncomfortable so that they can actually, see what's really happening in the world? Is it just going to be a very, like, light-hearted conversation or dialogue, or are you guys going to go into really important topics and issues that are actually currently in place?
I guess what we really want to focus on is the humanitarian crisis.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a very serious. And I suppose, speaking about the similarities, one key similarity really is that the conflict is a result of major powers fighting with one another and profiting off the conflict. But it's really in the end the civilians that suffer. And that's really what we want to highlight in the dialogues, the civilian struggle, and how that can be addressed.
No, brilliant. And I mean, just looking at what's currently happening as well in Sudan, there's a lot of conversations, and I mean, we are getting more comments. People are saying the exact same thing that you mentioned, Tahiya, was that, when it comes to Africa, people seem to also have this idea that it's not as important, it's not as relevant as Europe, for example. Why do you think we have that issue? Because, I mean, if you're looking at Africa in that sense and the value of Africa as a continent, it is the fastest growing continent in that sense. We have so many economies that are doing so well, yet when it comes to the value of people in Africa, they're not seen as valuable when compared to people in Europe. If this had to happen, for example, in Europe, if there's any humanitarian crisis in any country in Europe, there'd be a much bigger outroar and outcry as well. Why do you think Africa is always undermined?
I mean, also coming on the back of over 400 years of racism, and we'll see it also with the Palestinian cause, where in the West often Arab life is seen as lesser than any white life, but and it's good to point that out and point at Islamophobia and that racism. But also sometimes we need to introspect ourselves and think of, okay, who do we see as lesser and as the other? What causes do we deem less important? What life do we implicitly, maybe we don't realize, deem as less important? And I think just 2 years ago, a couple of MSAs around the country ran an initiative on anti-racism, highlighting, the racism we have embedded within our Muslim communities. And it's also like you understand where it comes from, in the sense that we're coming out of apartheid. A lot of people have grown up with this idea, of this, whereas non-white life is seen as less important. But there's also sort of tiers. You still see Indians kind of deeming coloreds and blacks as less human in a sense, and you even see colored racism deeming black life, and you see this. I'd say from personal experience in Cape Town, deeming black life as less important than colored life, and this might be quite controversial, but I think it's something we need to grapple with and interrogate.
That's definitely something we want to see change in the very near future. Just in closing, before we do let you guys go, I think, Tahiya, you can just give us maybe perhaps a final message or a call to action to our audience and our viewers. We have a lot of people that are watching today that are inspired by the work that you guys are doing as the MSA Union, but also the fact that, you are working with organizations and platforms that, are credible, that do amazing work in their own capacity. What's the message that you have for our audience right now?
MSA Union actually turned 50 years this year.
Wow.
So we've inherited an organization that has done great stuff over the past 50 years. I mean, initially, if you look at the founding members, those were heavily involved in the apartheid struggle. And obviously, if you fast forward a few years later, if you look at the likes of Shaira Kala or Fisia Hassan, and I'm sure that was like at your time at campus, when Fees Must Fall was a struggle. So alhamdulillah, that our struggle as MSA students, it's quite we don't have a so-called struggle, which means that it's up to us to make sure that when we're sitting in these couches of privilege, we use this privilege to help out those who need our assistance. So taking up Project BlackSeed is something that we were quite passionate about when we were approached by it, and we said whatever it takes. We know that it's exam season, but we are willing to give it our all. And we ask your audience to most definitely look up our infographics and that type of thing, to share whatever you can to get the word out. If you look at Khalid Baidoun on Instagram, he's constantly sharing a lot about both Palestine and Sudan, and that's quite credible graphics. So just to look out, make yourself aware. If you talk about Palestine, everyone knows what's going on. But when you bring up these the African struggle, it's quieted down and it's almost not talked about, like as if it's a sin. So to talk more, to raise a lot more awareness of what's going on, and to hopefully please come to our events.
Yeah, we hope to see many of our audience definitely at your events. But guys, thank you again for coming to INX and joining us tonight. Awesome, guys. That is Ahmed Ghoor as well as Tahiya Moosa Wadiwala as well, who just told us a little bit more about the MSA, well, the app from MSA Union, telling us more about Project BlackSeed. And if you guys definitely want to go out and support and contribute where you can, please go out and do so. On that note, we are going to take a quick ad break. We'll come right back.